Salutations to Raghunandana or Rama, who built the Setu over the seas, a noble man, a righteous king, and a god to many. While divinity is a matter of faith, historicity is a matter of existence. Did Rama really exist? Is Rama historical? Bharat Gyan has adopted an integrated approach to rationally understand the ancient and continuous civilization of India. 64 different subject capsules have been compiled so far. Historical Rama is one of them. In this, we examine established literary texts of the land, geography of the land corroborating with the texts and local legends, archaeological finds, continuous historical records, and new scientific techniques of validating all of these. D.K. Hari of Bharat Gyan will now take us through a journey of unraveling the historicity of Rama from a rational, logical, and a scientific perspective.
Standing under this tree, let us examine Rama's family tree.
Here is the Suryavamsa lineage. It starts from Kashyapa and Aditi. In this solar dynasty lineage, there have been many prominent kings, their names and their deeds corroborating well within the Ramayana text and also with the other legends of India. This corroboration of their deeds across various legends through thousands of years establishes the historicity of this lineage, with close to 51 generations before and 32 generations after him. This lineage can be traced all the way down to the Mahabharata period, wherein Brihatbala, 32nd generation from Rama, takes part in the Kurukshetra war on the side of the Kaurava and is killed by Abhimanyu on that fateful day.
If a character is imaginary, you would not have this length of a tree.
It is never so exhaustive. Valmiki composed the Ramayana during the lifetime of Rama himself. In fact, Valmiki was the caretaker of Rama's wife Sita and their children Lava and Kusha.
This clearly places Valmiki Ramayana as a biography, an authentic, credible historic text written during the time of Rama and validated by Rama himself when his sons narrated to him.
It is for this reason Ramayana is called an Itihasa, meaning it thus happened. In contrast, there have been many adaptations of the Ramayana across the land which have eulogized Rama through the centuries and millennia. These are more in the form of kavya or ballad and religious texts.
If Ramayana is a historical text, why is it called mythology now?
In 1808, James Mill and Charles Grant were appointed to write the history of India as syllabus for the Hellebury College. First they and later the genre of colonial writers classified the Indian texts and thought as fabricated trash and drilled it into the minds of Indians that these were mythology. Mill and Grant wrote the history of India deliberately without visiting India, lest they get influenced by its rich culture.
Well, in the last 100 years, giant strides have been made in understanding history using modern scientific tools. So, let us look at Ramayana from this fresh scientific perspective and see if Rama was indeed historical and whether specific dates can be attributed to him in the modern English calendar.
In contrast to Mill and Grant, Al-Biruni wrote about India after visiting India. When Al-Biruni visited India in 1030 CE, among the many things that he wrote about India, he also wrote in good detail about Rama having been a historical person of this land. 500 years later, in mid-1500s, Begum Hamida Banu, the daughter-in-law of Babur, wife of Humayun and mother of Akbar, commissioned a pictorial Ramayana. This is now housed in the Rydberg Museum, Zurich. Hamida Banu was constantly on the run along with her husband Humayun escaping from Sher Shah Suri. Because of this, she could relate to Rama and Sita in exile. It was also prophesied that her future born son would become the emperor of India, and hence she could also relate to Kausalya, the mother of Rama. Her son Akbar, the Mughal Emperor of India, also commissioned a Ramayana during his rule. This is now housed at the Maharaja Savai Man Singh Museum in Jaipur. Abdur Rahim Khan Khan, a courtier in Akbar's court, also had a Ramayana compiled in the Persian language. In his poetry of Ramayana, every chapter ends with the phrase Khane Khanan. They all wrote Ramayana not as religious texts, but because they considered it as a historical text of their land. In Tamil literature, there was a historic period known as Sangam Age. The Sangam Age literature is considered to be secular in nature. In two of the Sangam texts, namely Agananuru and the classical text Silapadigaram, Rama is mentioned a couple of times from a historical perspective. Ramayana is a geographically correct text. Every place visited by Rama is today identifiable by historic landmarks, commemorative temples and local legends. Prince Bharata, the brother of Rama, while returning from his maternal grandfather's house in Kekeya, travels through the northwestern part of India. The rivers he crosses in his travels are mentioned in detail. One of the rivers mentioned therein is the Saraswati Nadi. This Saraswati dried up over 4,500 years ago. This clearly indicates that the story of Ramayana is at least 5,000 years old and could even be much older than that. In the same verse, the names of the rivers that Bharata crosses are mentioned in the sequence in which they are geographically present today. This helps us today to identify the route Bharata took to reach Ayodhya from Kekeya.
Valmiki lived in his ashrama. He did not travel to all the places traversed by Rama. It surely would not have been possible for him to have built a story into the local legends in those remote days.
Since the story is well intertwined in the local legends in every place mentioned in the Ramayana text, we clearly see a conjunction of archaeology, local legends and literature converging with the geography of the land. Such convergence is rarely seen in the other historical texts of the world. Today, to keep time, we use a clock which has got 12 units and 3 hands. The ancient Indians used the sky as their clock dial. The ancient Indians divided the sky into 27 nakshatra or star units. The hands were 7, namely Sun, Moon and the 5 planets of Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mars and Mercury. Each combination uniquely denotes an astronomical configuration in time, and the same combination does not repeat itself. Ramayana and Mahabharata, the traditional historical texts of India, contain many astronomical observations as recorded by the chroniclers. When we cull out these observations and search for them using the planetarium software, it throws up dates of when these configurations must have occurred in the past. We shall call this technique of dating using culled out astronomical observations embedded in ancient texts as archaeoastronomy, as this technique of exploring the sky configurations in the past for events mentioned is akin to digging into the earth for archaeological evidences. In the Ramayana, a handful of observations have been mentioned. Here are the prominent events for which such observations have been recorded to some detail in the text. We all know that Rama's birth is celebrated on Sri Rama Navami, which means that he was born on the 9th day of the lunar month of Chaitra. This shloka gives a detailed star configuration at the time of his birth. From this shloka, we can list out the positions of the planets. When this data is entered into the planetarium software, it gives us the date of Rama's birth as 10th January 5114 BCE. When the date of Bharata's birth is culled out and entered into the software, it gives us the date as 11th January 5114 BCE at 5:30 am. It is indeed interesting to note here that this time calculated is exactly 16 hours from that of Rama's birth as calculated by the same software. The text also mentions that Bharata was born 16 hours after Rama. On the eve of the coronation of Rama, King Dasaratha calls in his courtiers and discusses the planetary configuration of that evening and states that they do not augur well for him and he would like to transfer the reins of the kingdom to Rama. King Dasaratha informs Rama about the malefic effects the star configurations were going to bring upon himself and hence asks Rama to take over the kingdom. This configuration, when entered into the software, gives us the date 4th January 5089 BCE. The elapsed time, as calculated by the software, between the event of his birth to his pre-coronation event is 25 years. This tallies well with the age of Rama as mentioned in the text. After Lakshmana cut Surpanaka's nose in Panchavati at Nasik, she first rushes to her brothers Khar and Dushan and instigates them to engage Rama and Lakshmana in a battle to avenge her nose cut. Following this, Khar and Dushan advance towards Rama and urge him to fight, stating their prowess. The sarga describing their wordy duel before their fight clearly indicates an eclipse in the early evening when the stars are seen and described. Stars and planets cannot be seen in the late afternoon sky. Khar in fact tells Rama that as much as he would like to talk about his strengths, since the sun was expected to disappear and there was little time left, he would like to start the fight immediately. In the description, they also describe Mars in the middle of the planetary alignment. It is indeed extremely rare to see Mars in the middle of a planetary alignment. Plotting these rare planetary positions described for this event gives us the date of 7th October 5077 BCE. It is to be noted that independent calculations show that a total solar eclipse did occur in Panchavati, Nasik on that day at 3:10 p.m. In his search for Sita, Hanuman goes to Lanka and finds her in an Ashoka grove. Her face is described here as being forlorn and caught in an eclipse. Plotting the sky configuration for that evening, we can see that there was indeed a lunar eclipse at Lanka that evening, which is 12th September 5076 BCE. The dates thrown up by the planetary software are internally consistent with the sequence of events of the Ramayana legend. This fact of internal consistency gives a high degree of credibility to the dates calculated by the software.
Let us now meet Sri Pushkar Bhatnagar of Delhi, who has done the pioneering work of astronomically dating the events of Ramayana.
You see, India is a unique civilization. It has a tradition of recording events with astronomical observations. The advancement on science and technology is now opening new possibilities of exploring the past. What looked like impossible a few years ago, such as fixing a date for the events mentioned in the lifetime of Lord Rama, can now be done easily by using a planetarium software. This particular aspect places the study of Indian civilization at an advantage because we can go beyond the normal archaeological evidences which have been so far the mainstay of determining the Indian history. This is the planetarium software which is capable of generating the sky view on the desktop for any day in the past or in the future. I have used this planetarium software to give dates to the astronomical data available in Valmiki Ramayana, and by this method I have arrived at the exact dates for many events in the lifetime of Lord Ram. The fact that not only one planetary combination but an entire sequence of the astronomical data tallies is a self-corroborating proof of the accuracy of the recordings and the correctness of the finding. It has taken lots of efforts to find the precise dates because it needed lot of elimination of other possible dates which did not satisfy the description of the observation and sequence of the events in the entirety. I have got my findings published in the shape of a book titled Dating the Era of Lord Ram. This particular book is in public domain for almost 4 years now, and I have received a number of views confirming what I have found, and I am yet to hear from somebody or anybody disagreeing with my findings.
We find that the astronomical dating method not only fixes the time period of the event, but also shows the geographical location from where the unique planetary configuration could have been observed. Thus we find that the total solar eclipse on the day of the Kardoshan episode could indeed have occurred at Panchavati as described in the Valmiki text. Similarly, the configuration of the night sky of Hanuman meeting Sita could indeed have been observed from present-day Lanka, as has been mentioned in the text. From the dates arrived at using archaeoastronomy, the date of birth of Rama, that is Sri Ramanavami, in the Chitra month occurs on 10th January in 5114 BCE. Today, this 9th day in the lunar month of the Chitra occurs around 21st April. There is a gap of about 100 days here. This gap has occurred in a period of 7,200 years. How does one explain this gap? Varahamihira, the noted astronomer-mathematician of medieval India, who wrote his treatise Brihat Samhita in 530 CE on the topic of Vasant Sampat, the retrograde motion of the vernal equinox, states that for every 72 years, one day should be adjusted in the calendar. He also advocated this correction to be carried out every 500 years. Unfortunately, the correction factor has not been applied. One day for every 72 years over the last 7,200 years between 5114 BCE and now accounts for the difference of 100 days. The modern astronomers have also explained this through the phenomenon of precession of equinox.
Let us look at ground facts now. No major archaeological relics of the period of Rama have been found on ground so far. This is because Rama is said to have lived thousands of years ago. In a continuous civilization, generations come and go, and as they keep building and rebuilding their cities, they destroy or alter evidences of the previous generation. Hence, we don't find, and it's not easy to find, evidences in Ayodhya or other parts of the land today.
To understand this, let us think of a clock which stopped ticking during an earthquake. It is an evidence of the time of the quake. But if it had continued to tick along, then it ceases to be an evidence. While lack of archaeological evidences on land seems like a problem in proving historicity of Rama, B.B. Lal, the renowned historian of India, states that the existence of only one Mathura, one Ayodhya and one Chitrakuta itself is an advantage in proving the authenticity of these places. Let us look at Krishna, the other legendary hero of India. We face a similar problem here too. There is no real archaeological evidence on land due to continuous civilization in Mathura, Vrindavan and Dwaraka. Few decades back, due to the pioneering work by marine archaeologists, they have been able to discover a whole town submerged under the sea west of the coastal town of Dwaraka. It is because the deep seas swallowed Dwaraka, the town became uninhabitable and frozen in time, and hence after so many thousands of years, it is still able to provide evidence for the existence of an advanced township tallying with the city described in the epic Mahabharata. Similarly, the only place to look for archaeological evidences of Rama is the Rama Setu, which today could be submerged in the sea. Rama and his team are said to have built this bridge over the seas to Lanka. If the bridge has been underwater for many centuries and has been undisturbed by man, then this can provide us the vital archaeological clues we are looking for to establish the historicity of Rama. Because only if Rama is historical, then can this bridge be man-made. In corollary, if the Setu is shown to be man-made, as per the textual descriptions, and there are other scientifically corroborating data, then it proves the historicity of Rama. If this bridge is mentioned in passing in the text, it does not warrant further examination. The text gives the process of bridge construction in great and specific detail. This level of detailing of bridge construction urges us to examine the details. This construction detailing can be studied from the aspects of survey, planning and civil engineering involved. Rama and his team seem to have surveyed this land for a possible bridge construction site. This survey and their interaction with the sea
is expressed in the text as Samudradeva's response that it is not the nature of the seas to be shallow but to be deep with wild sea creatures, and hence it would not be possible for the army of Vanara to swim across. It is during this interaction with the Samudra that they identify an undersea ridge joining the two land masses. Nala introduces himself as a biological descendant of the Vishwakarma clan and offers to build this bridge. Rama accepts his credentials and appoints him as the chief engineer. Under the command of Nala, the Vanara army go about building this bridge on the sea ridge. Let us examine the civil engineering techniques employed in this bridge construction. The first is the foundation details. The text very clearly states that wood from a variety of trees, the names of which are mentioned here, were first piled on the sea ridge to give a pile foundation or wood cushion effect. It was on top of this the large and small stones were piled on. This animation here shows us clearly the seabed from which the sea ridge rises as an outcrop, which is natural and undulating. On top of this we have the trees, then the stones, large and small, and finally we have the flat finished level. Even to this day, the remnants of the bridge have this flat finished level. Due to the passage of time of many millennia, sand has accumulated over the structure, and what we are able to see now is mainly sandbars and shoals. If we carefully shovel away the accumulated sand, we are certain to see the layers of the bridge construction. In the bottom layer, the wood used by the Vanara for the foundation would certainly be there. Obviously, over the last so many thousand years, the wood would have solidified and become carbonaceous material and would probably now be botanical grains. The text then speaks of the Vanara holding ropes on both sides of the bridge being constructed and the wood and the stones being piled between them. The text clearly mentions that the Vanara held ropes for many yojana to build the bridge in proper linear alignment. We all now know that for the construction of any worthwhile structure, it is essential to maintain proper alignment and dimensions. From this description, it is clear that it was not just random throwing of stones, but a planned effort which took into consideration the concept of linear alignment, which is even today evident from the aerial photograph of the bridge. Dr. S.R. Rao, the eminent marine archaeologist who led the Dwaraka marine expedition, says, for a civilization which could build a dike and a whole city on reclaimed land at Dwaraka in 3200 BCE, the engineering skill to build the Nalasetu to Lanka must have been well within their civil engineering capability.
We are now with Dr. S.R. Rao, the founder of marine archaeology in India.
Marine archaeology was introduced in India as early as 1980, and the legendary city of Dwarka was discovered on the west coast. Building of Rama Setu was not a difficult task at all for the people of the Ramayana period, because at Dwarka we have seen that people could convert a natural rock into a berthing place for the ocean-going ships. Still earlier, there was a tidal dock at Lothal. Here, all that they had to do was to pile up boulders over the natural rock when the sea level was much lower, and thereby make people pass more easily than nature provided during intertidal or high tide period. Well, we find there piles of boulders laid on the rock, and that could have been only done by man and not by any other agency.
Modern civil engineers, when they execute projects, they first understand the topography of the land, nature of soil, and only then build the structure. Nala used this topographical feature to build the bridge by literally filling the gaps with wood foundation and stone on top of it to build the bridge very quickly. An engineer's ingenuity comes in using the topography of the land, and this seems to have been exhibited in this case by Nala. The indicator for this is available earlier in Ramayana story, where Hanuman, when jumping over to Lanka, hopped and stepped over the sea hillocks and even used them as resting spots en route to reaching Lanka. By leveraging this topography, they built this bridge in 5 days. The distances they covered each day is also mentioned in the text. In the text, it's explicitly mentioned that the total length of the bridge was 100 yojana in length and 10 yojana in width. This dimension is repeated in the Mahabharata text also. This is a 10:1 ratio. Today, at actual site conditions, the Rama Setu or Adam's Bridge measures to 35 kilometers in length by 3.5 kilometers in width. This is also a 10:1 ratio. When there is a bridge or any barrier in the sea, there is bound to be splashing when the waves lash against it constantly, probably even destroying it eventually. To overcome this problem, it is essential to build in gaps or passages in the structure itself to allow the water to flow through. This concept is known as pore pressure. Today, on examination of this structure underwater, one can see gaps left in the piled stone formation for the water to pass through end to end. The sea in this region does not produce waves when it lashes against the bridge. Probably Nala, the engineer, had understood this pore pressure concept and had incorporated it in the bridge design. After the victorious battle with Ravana, while returning with Sita to Ayodhya in the Pushpak Vimana, they fly over this bridge. Rama then points this bridge to Sita and states as to how difficult it was for them to construct and how it was only Nala, the engineer par excellence, who could execute it, and Rama calls it Nala Setu.
Over the last few minutes, we have seen with a certain clarity and a detailed understanding how this bridge is a civil engineering marvel as explained in the text, a man-made accretion over a natural sea ridge.
When did this Nala Setu come to be called Adam's Bridge? The bridge was originally called Nala Setu, as we have seen. Later the people, out of their admiration and veneration for Rama, started calling it Rama Setu, and later it also got the name Setu Bandha, that which joins two lands. This has been a walking bridge for many millennia. During the course of its early usage, one of the early Islamic religious leaders of Sri Lanka walked over this bridge and reached Lanka to do penance there. Since he was the early Islamic man, he was called Adam by the Sri Lankan Muslims. When the Europeans came to this part of the world, they could easily correlate to the name Adam, and they started calling it Adam's Bridge in their records, and the name stayed.
This bridge has found mention in various historical records over the last 1,000 years in various forms such as travelogues, coins and maps.
Both Indian and Sri Lankan coins have mentioned about the Setu. In fact, from 1400 CE onwards, the Yalpana Arya Chakravarti kings of present-day Jaffna in northeast Sri Lanka regularly minted coins embossing the name Setu on it in their Tamil language. These kings considered themselves as Setu Kavalan, or the guardians of this bridge. On the Indian side, the Ramnad king still has the title Setupati, indicating that he is the guardian of the bridge on this side of the land. When the Europeans came here, they prepared the maps of this land. James Rennell was the first European cartographer of India. In his maps, he clearly shows this as Adam's Bridge. On the Sri Lankan side, the Dutch maps show it as Adam's Brug, and the Sri Lankan copper plates also show the same. Many travelers have visited this area in the last 1,000 years. They have mentioned about this bridge in their travelogues. The foremost among them is Al-Biruni, who has mentioned it in his magnum opus Persian book Kitabul Hind. In this book, in pages 92 to 102, he calls this region of the bridge the Dikhe of Rama, or the direction of Rama. He further goes on to call Rama as the son of Dasharatha, going to show the belief in the historicity of Rama even way back in early 1000 CE. Al-Biruni also gives detailed description of other geographical locations mentioned in Ramayana, such as Kishkinda. Marco Polo, who travelled over much of Asia, also seems to have gone past Ramasetu en route to reaching Malabar. He mentions Ramasetu in his book. Varthema, who travelled all over Arabia, Central Asia and India, also specifically mentions about this bridge of Rama. Like these three, over the next 700 years till date, many travellers have visited this region and have mentioned this bridge. This goes to show its historicity because of its repeated mention. In 1902, C.D. MacLean, in his Manual of Administration of Madras Presidency, mentions that this Rama's bridge was a walking bridge continuously used by the people for thousands of years till it was washed away in 1480 by a major storm. Post the storm, this bridge became dilapidated and unusable. All these facts have been brought out in the Ramanathapuram Gazetteer of 1972. The Gazette states that, as per literary information and local tradition, it is a bridge built by the Vanarasena or Kurangu Padai, and that it was in use as a regular footbridge until 1480, when it was washed away in a storm. As recent as 1920s, the great Tamil poet Mahakavi Subramanya Bharati, in his poetry, echoes the yearnings of the Tamil people to repair and rebuild this footbridge to Lanka. In the last few decades, man-made satellites have been regularly orbiting the Earth and photographing various parts of the Earth. One such area they have photographed is the southern part of India. In this set of photographs, the bridge is also visible. It can be distinctly seen as a shallow underwater causeway connecting the two lands. These photographs do suggestively indicate it to be man-made due to its unique curvature. The opinion of many is that this could be the man-made bridge as detailed in the Ramayana text. While publishing these photographs, what has been mentioned is that the land at the two ends of this bridge is many lakh years old based on their understanding of geology, archaeology and other artifacts at the ground. They further go on to state that the connecting causeway is also old. While the satellite images suggest the man-made nature of the bridge, they alone cannot help date ground structures. These satellite images help augment the already available references to arrive at a good indication of the man-made nature of this bridge. It is imperative to use other sources of data and techniques to arrive at a conclusive proof for the age and structure of the bridge. Today, on an average, this causeway is about 2 meters below water. When this bridge was built, it must have been at least about 1 meter above the then water level. That is, when the bridge was built, the sea must have been 3 meters or 9 feet below the present day sea level. As per the World Oceanography Report, a 9 feet rise in sea levels due to the melting of the polar ice caps and global warming should have occurred over 7,000 years. This helps us to date the bridge construction to about 7,000 years ago or 5000 BCE using oceanography as a dating tool.
Given the repeated references to this bridge, its usage, and understanding its importance, today we need to rightfully promulgate an order under the Archaeological Survey of India Act, Clause 4, to call this a Heritage Monument of India. It is a fit case to be called a civil engineering marvel of an ancient civilization.
At this point, it is pertinent to bring in an observation from the Mahabharata text.
When the Pandava princes were travelling through the forest, they came across Rishi Markandeya, who regales them with stories of their land. In one of the stories, he tells them about Nala Setu, how it was built by Nala, and being an engineering marvel, it was a protected monument of their times.
What does the Setu symbolize to us today? It symbolizes many things to many people. If we look at it from the rational, historical and scientific perspective, we see that it was constructed by Nala, Nila and the Vanara team. These people were the original residents of Kishkinda. Kishkinda is modern-day Hampi. This region is in the Dravida land, South India, which means that they are the original Adi Dravida. So this Nalasetu is an engineering marvel, an engineering feat of the Adi Dravida.
To recap, from the point of archaeoastronomy, Rama is found to have walked the earth about 7,000 years back. The detailing of the bridge, the only archaeological remain left, and the sea level rise factors also indicate similar dates. The veneration of Rama has not been limited to India alone. The Egyptian pharaohs called themselves Ramses of the Solar dynasty, which seems to be a derivative of the name Rama and the Suryavamsa dynasty. In the east, in Thailand, the kings of the ruling Chakri dynasty take on the title Rama. The present king is Rama the IX. This emphasizes the spread of the glory, effulgence of Rama across civilizations the world over and brings forth the stature in which Rama was held across the globe through the times.
Entero